Hello. How are you guys doing? Welcome to Tuesday afternoon story time. Hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for being here. Hello to Terror and Heartless, and to anybody else who might be lurking or watching this later. I hope you're having a fabulous day and all that good stuff. I didn't know there was singing in this compilation. Hi, Terror. How's it going? Okay, so I realized that I never read the back of the book before I started the book. So it's too late. So I just have to remember that I need to read the backs of the books before I start the books. So, yeah. Anyway. I noticed that while I was sitting here waiting for music to play. I'm gonna adjust my mic a little bit. You might hear some noise. Okay. Alright. Get a little closer to me. I know, how dare. I know. Alright, so, I'll just need some help knowing if the, levels and everything are good. I feel like my shirt is crooked. Maybe my shoulders are crooked. I don't know. Okay, anyway, thank you for confirming levels. Okay. Without further ado, I suppose there's no reason for me to delay too much. I read 4 chapters the last time. Maybe V is crooked. I plan to read 4 more today. That's kind of my plan. So I'm gonna cut this down just a little bit more. Just a little bit. Just a little bit more. Okay. So, okay, yeah, 4 chapters last time, 4 chapters this time, and then the 3rd installment will be the last 5. So, without further ado, Chapter 5. If you have ever experienced something that feels strangely familiar, as if the exact same thing has happened to you before, then you are experiencing what the French call déjà vu. Like most French expressions, ennui, which is a fancy term for severe boredom, or la petite morte, which describes a feeling that part of you has died, déjà vu refers to something that is usually not very pleasant because it is curious to feel as if you have heard or seen something before. Chapter 5. If you have ever experienced something that feels strangely familiar, as if the exact same thing has happened to you before, then you are experiencing what the French call déjà vu. Like most French expressions, ennui, which is a fancy term for severe boredom, or la petite morte, which describes a feeling that part of you has died, déjà vu refers to something that is not usually very pleasant, and it was not pleasant for the Baudelaire orphans to stand outside the Freaks' caravan listening to Count Olaf and experiencing the queasy feelings of déjà vu. "These lions are going to be the most exciting thing at Caligari Carnival," Olaf announced, as more and more people drew near to see what all the fuss was about. As you all know, unless you are incredibly dim-witted, a stubborn mule will move in the proper direction if there is a carrot in front of it and a stick behind it. It will move toward the carrot because it wants the reward of food, and away from the stick because it does not want the punishment of pain. And these lions will do the same. "What's going on?" Hugo asked the children, walking out of the caravan with Colette and Kevin close behind. "Déjà vu," Sonny said bitterly. Even the youngest Baudelaire recognized Count Olaf's cruel speech about the stubborn mule from when the 3 children had been living in Olaf's house. Back then, the villain had talked about a stubborn mule in order to force Violet to marry him, a plot that thankfully had been foiled at the very last minute. But now he was using the very same words to cook up another scheme, and it gave the siblings a queasy feeling to watch it happen. "These lions," Count Olaf said, "will do as I say, because they want to avoid the punishment of this whip." With a flourish, he flicked his whip at the lions again, who cowered behind the bars, and some of the visitors to the carnival applauded. "But if the whip is the stick," asked the bald man, "what is the carrot?" "The carrot," Olaf repeated, and laughed in a particularly nasty way. "The reward for the lions who obey me will be a delicious meal. Lions are carnivorous, which means they'll eat meat, and here at Caligari Carnival, they'll have the finest meat we have to offer." He turned and pointed his whip at the entrance to the Freaks' caravan, where the Baudelaires were standing with their co-workers. "The Freaks you see here aren't normal people, and so they lead depressing lives," he announced. "They'll be happy to exhibit themselves in the name of entertainment." "Of course we will," Colette said. "We do it every day." "Then you won't mind being the most important part of the lion show," Olaf replied. "We're not going to feed these lions regular meals, so they'll be very, very hungry by the time the show begins. Each day, instead of a show at the House of Freaks, we'll randomly choose a freak and watch the lions devour them." Everyone cheered again, except for Hugo, Colette, and Kevin, and the 3 siblings who all stood in horrified silence. "That will be exciting," said the man with pimples on his face. "Just think, violence and sloppy eating combined in one fabulous show." "I couldn't agree more," said a woman who was standing nearby. "It was hilarious watching that 2-headed freak eat, but it'll be even more hilarious watching the 2-headed freak get eaten." "I'd prefer to watch the hunchback get eaten," said someone else in the crowd. "He's so funny he doesn't even have a regular back." "The fun starts tomorrow afternoon," Count Olaf cried. "See you then." "I can't wait," said the woman as the crowd began to disperse, a word which here means walk off to purchase souvenirs or leave the carnival. "I'm going to tell all my friends." "I'm going to call that reporter at the Daily Punctilio," the man with pimples said, heading toward the phone booth. "This carnival is about to get very popular, and maybe they'll write an article about it." "You were right, boss," said the hook-handed man. "Things are about to get much better here." "Of course he was right, please," Madame Lulu said. "He is a brilliant man, and brave man, and generous man. He is brilliant for thinking of the lion show, please. He is brave man for hitting lions with whip, please. And he is generous man for giving lions to Lulu. He gave those lions to you? Asked a sinister voice. They were presents? Now that most of the carnival visitors had departed, the Baudelaires could see Esme Squalor step forward from the doorway of another caravan and walk toward Count Olaf and Madame Lulu. As she passed the lion's trailer, she ran her enormous fingernails along the bars, and the lions whimpered in fear. "So you gave Madame Lulu some lions," she said. "What did you get me?" Count Olaf scratched his head with one scraggly hand and looked a little embarrassed. "Nothing," he admitted, "but you can share my whip if you like." Madame Lulu leaned over and gave Olaf a kiss on the cheek. "He gave lions to me, please, because I did such wonderful fortune-telling." "You should have seen it, Esme," Olaf said. "Lulu and I entered the fortune-telling tent and turned out all the lights, and the crystal ball began to hum its magical hum. Then magical lightning crackled above us as Madame Lulu told me to concentrate as hard as I could. While I closed my eyes, she gazed into her crystal ball and told me that one of the Baudelaire parents is alive and hiding in the Mortmain Mountains. As a reward, I gave her these lions." "So Madame Lulu needs a carrot too, eh?" the hook-handed man said with a laugh. "First thing tomorrow morning," Olaf continued, "Madame Lulu will consult her crystal ball again and tell me where the Baudelaires are." Esme glared at Lulu. "And what sort of gift will you give then, Olaf?" "Be reasonable, my dear," Count Olaf said to his girlfriend. "The lions will make Caligari Carnival much more popular, so Madame Lulu can devote her time to fortune-telling and give us the information we need to finally steal the Baudelaire fortune." "I hate to criticize," Hugo said hesitantly, "but is there any way that we can make the carnival more popular without feeding us to the lions? I must confess that I'm a little nervous about that part." "You heard the crowd when I told them about the new attraction," Count Olaf said. "They couldn't wait to see the lions devour you, and all of us need to do our part to give people what they want. Your part is to return to the Freaks Caravan until tomorrow, and the rest of us will do our part and start digging the pit." "Pit?" one of the white-faced women asked. "What do we need a pit for?" "To keep the lions in," Olaf replied, "so they only eat whichever freak jumps down there. Let's dig it over by the roller coaster." "Good idea, boss," the bald man said. "There are shovels in Tool Caravan," Lulu said. "I will show you, please." "I'm not going to dig a pit," Esme announced as the others walked away. "I might break a nail. Besides, I need to go talk to Count Olaf. Alone?" "Oh, all right," Count Olaf said. "Let's go in the guest caravan where we won't be disturbed." Olaf and Esme walked off in one direction, and Madame Lulu led the henchmen in the other, leaving the three children alone with their co-workers. "Well, we'd better go inside," Colette said. "Maybe we can think of a way not to get eaten." "Oh, let's not think about those fearsome creatures," Hugo said with a shudder. "Let's play another game of dominoes instead." "Chabo, my other head, and I will be along in a moment," Violet said. "We want to finish our hot chocolate." "You might as well enjoy it," Kevin said glumly, following Hugo and Colette back into the Freaks Caravan. "It might turn out to be the last hot chocolate you ever drink." Kevin shut the door with both hands, and the Baudelaires stepped farther away from the caravan so they could talk without being overheard. "Adding cinnamon to hot chocolate is a terrific idea, Sonny," Violet said quietly, "but I'm having trouble enjoying it." "Ificat," Sonny said, which meant me too. "Count Olaf's latest scheme leaves a bad taste in my mouth," Klaus said, "and I don't think cinnamon is going to help." "We have to get into that fortune-telling tent," Violet said, "and this may be our only chance." "Do you think it's really true?" Klaus said. "Do you think Madame Lulu really saw something in her crystal ball?" "I don't know," Violet said, "but I do know that from my studies of electricity, that lightning can't appear inside a tent. Something mysterious is going on, and we need to find out what it is." "Chow," Sunny said, which meant before we're thrown to the lions. "But do you think it's real?" Klaus asked. "I don't know," Violet said testily, a word which here means in her regular voice getting louder, forgetting her disguise because she was becoming very frustrated and upset. "I don't know if Madame Lulu is a fortune teller. I don't know how Count Olaf always knows where we are. I don't know where the Snicket file is, or why someone else had Olaf's tattoo, or what VFD stands for, or why there's a secret passageway that leads to our house, or if our parents are alive," Klaus interrupted. Do you know if one of our parents is really alive?" The middle Baudelaire's voice quivered, and his sisters turned to look at him, a feat that was difficult for Violet, who was still sharing his shirt, and saw that he was crying. Violet leaned so her head was against his while Sunny put her mug down and crawled closer to hug his knees, and the three Baudelaires stood quietly together for a few moments. Grief, a type of sadness that most often occurs when you have lost someone or something you love, is a sneaky thing, because it can disappear for a long time and then pop back up when you least expect it. When I am able, I go out walking on Briny Beach very early in the morning, which is the best time to find materials important to the Baudelaire case, and the ocean is so peaceful that I feel peaceful too, as if I'm no longer grieving for the woman I love and will never see again. But then, when I am cold and duck into a tea shop where the owner is expecting me, I have only to reach for the sugar bowl before my grief returns, and I find myself crying so loudly that other customers ask me if I could possibly lower my sobs. With the Baudelaire orphans, it was as if their grief was a very heavy object that they each took turns carrying so that they would not be all crying at once, but sometimes the object was too heavy for one of them to move without weeping. So Violet and Sunny stood next to Klaus, reminding him that this was something they could all carry together until at last they found a safe place to lay it down. "I'm sorry I was testy, Klaus," Violet said. "There's just so much we don't know that it's hard to think about it all at once." "Chithvi," Sunny said, which meant, "But I can't help thinking about our parents." "Me neither," Violet admitted. "I keep wondering if one of them survived the fire." "But if they did," Klaus said, "why would they be hiding in a faraway place? Why aren't they trying to find us?" "Maybe they are," Violet said quietly. "Maybe they're searching for us everywhere they can think of, but they can't find us because we've been hiding and disguising ourselves for so long." "But why doesn't our mother or father contact Mr. Poe?" Klaus said. "We've tried to contact him," Violet pointed out, "but he doesn't answer our telegrams, and we can't seem to reach him by phone. If one of our parents has survived the fire, maybe they're having the same wretched luck." "Galfaskin," Sunny pointed out. By Galfaskin, she meant something like, "This is all guesswork. Let's go to the fortune-telling tent and see if we can find out anything for sure, and we'd better do it soon before the others get back." "You're right, Sunny," Violet said, and put her mug down next to Sunny's. Klaus put down his mug, and all three Baudelaires took disguised steps away from their hot chocolate. Violet and Klaus walked awkwardly in their shared pants, leaning against one another with every step, and Sunny followed alongside, still crawling so she would look half wolf if anyone watched them as they made their way through the carnival toward the fortune-telling tent. But no one was watching the Baudelaire orphans. The visitors to the carnival had gone home to tell their friends about the lion show happening the next day. The children's co-workers were in the Freaks caravan bemoaning their fate, a word which here means playing dominoes rather than trying to think of a way out of their predicament. Madame Lulu and Olaf's assistants were digging the pit over by the roller coaster still covered in ivy. Count Olaf and Esme Squalor were bickering in the guest caravan, which was located at the far end of the carnival where I had stayed with my brother many years ago. And the rest of Madame Lulu's employees were closing down the carnival and hoping that someday they might work in a less miserable place. So nobody was watching as the children approached the tent next to Lulu's caravan and stopped for a minute at the flap that led inside. The fortune-telling tent no longer stands at Caligari Carnival, or anywhere else for that matter. Anyone wandering through the blackened and desolate hinterlands would scarcely be able to tell that there'd been any tents at all. But even if everything looked exactly the same as when the Baudelaire orphans stayed there, it is unlikely that a traveler would understand what the tent's decoration meant, as nowadays there are so few living experts on such subjects, and the experts who are alive are all in terrible circumstances, or, in my case, on their way to terrible circumstances in the hope of making them less terrible. But the Baudelaire orphans, who, as you will recall, had only arrived at the carnival the night before, and so had never seen the fortune-telling tent in daylight until this very moment, could see how the tent was decorated, which is why they stopped to stare at it. At first glance, the painting on the fortune-telling tent seemed to depict an eye, like the decoration on Madame Lulu's caravan and the tattoo on Count Olaf's ankle. The three children had seen similar eyes wherever they went, from a building in the shape of an eye when they were working in a lumber mill, to an eye on Esme Squalor's purse when they were hiding in a hospital, to a huge swarm of eyes that surrounded them in their most frightening nightmares. And although the siblings never understood quite what these eyes meant, they were so weary of gazing at them that they would never pause to look at one again. But there are many things in life that become different if you take a long look at them. And as the children paused in front of the fortune-telling tent, the painting seemed to change before their very eyes, until it did not seem like a painting at all, but an insignia. An insignia is a sort of mark that usually stands for an organization or a business, and the mark can be of any sort whatsoever. Sometimes an insignia can be a simple shape, such as a wavy line to indicate an organization concerned with rivers or oceans, or a square to indicate an organization concerned with geometry or sugar cubes. Sometimes an insignia can be a small picture of something, such as a torch to indicate an organization that is flammable, or the three-eyed girl outside the House of Freaks, indicating that people who were unusual in some way were on display inside. And sometimes the insignia can be part of the name of the organization, such as the first few letters, or its initials. The Baudelaires, of course, were not involved in any sort of business aside from disguising themselves as carnival freaks, and as far as they knew, they were not members of an organization of any kind, and they had never even been to the hinterlands until Count Olaf's car had taken them down rarely ridden road. But the three children took a long look at the insignia on Madame Lulu's tent because they knew that it was important to them somehow, as if whoever had painted the insignia knew that they would come here and wanted to bring them inside. "Do you think," Klaus said, his voice trailing off as he squinted at the tent. "I didn't see it at first glance," Violet said, "but as I'm taking this long look..." Sunny said, and without another word, the three children peered into the entrance and, seeing no sign of anyone inside, took a few steps forward. If someone had been watching the youngsters, they would have seen those few hesitant steps as they entered the fortune-teller's tent as quietly as they could. But there was no one watching. There was no one to see the flap of cloth as it closed quietly behind them, making the whole tent shiver ever so slightly. And there was no one to notice that the painting shivered too. There was no one watching the Baudelaire orphans as they drew closer to finding the answers to their questions or solving the mysteries of their lives. There was no one to take a long look at the painting on the tent to see that it was not an image of an eye, as it appeared to be at first glance, but an insignia, standing for an organization the children knew only as VFD. That's the end of chapter 5. Let me catch up on the cheat. Level still okay? Yep, 445 breakdown. Chapter 5 hype. I was hoping it would be 20 to 30 pages of that same opening text about deja vu. See, this is why I love these books so much, because little things like that are so clever. And like, here, I'll show you so you can even see it. So, you've got chapter 5, right? And then the next page is chapter 5. And I just love little stuff like that. Like, it's just so clever. Tori only knows laughing in a creepy way. Violence and sloppy eating sounds like a terror family get-together. That's like the 17th month anniversary. We should ask Riddy if she's ever been gifted for a 17th month anniversary. Hey, Timo, how's it going? Good to see you. Oh, hey, Riddy. Speak of the lion. Olaf is clearly a better parent when it comes to finding kids. Yeah. Claps for chapters 1 to 4 of Austere Academy because she's playing catch up. That's fine. That's fair. I hope that's still good for you. Thank you for the claps. Probably I have. So gifted. Riddy is so gifted. I know this for certain. Okay, I'm going to press on. Hello. Oh, you weren't saying hello to me. You're saying hello to Riddy. Hello again, anyway. Okay, chapter 6. Actually, hang on one second. This little edge of my green screen is bothering me, and I want to fix it. There we go. I mean, you probably can't even see it, but I can, and it's bothering me. Chapter 6. There are many difficult things in this world to hide, but a secret is not one of them. It is difficult to hide an airplane, for instance, because you generally need to find a deep hole or an enormous haystack and sneak the airplane inside in the middle of the night, but it's easy to hide a secret about an airplane because you can merely write it on a tiny piece of paper and tape it to the bottom of your mattress anytime you're at home. It is difficult to hide a symphony orchestra because you usually need to rent a soundproof room and borrow as many sleeping bags as you can find, but it is easy to hide a secret about a symphony orchestra because you can merely whisper it into the ear of a trustworthy friend or music critic. And it is difficult to hide yourself because you sometimes need to stuff yourself into the trunk of an automobile or concoct a disguise out of whatever you can find. But it is easy to hide a secret about yourself because you can merely type it into a book and hope it falls into the right hands. My dear sister, if you're reading this, I am still alive and heading north to try to find you. Had the Baudelaire orphans been looking for an airplane as they stepped inside Madame Lulu's fortune-telling tent, they would have known to look for the tip of a wing sticking out from under an enormous black tablecloth decorated with shiny silver stars, which hung over a table in the center of the tent. Had they been looking for a symphony orchestra, they would have known to listen for the sound of someone coughing or bumping up against an oboe as they hid in the corners of the tent, which are covered in heavy curtains. But the children were not looking for methods of air travel or professional musicians. They were looking for secrets, and the tent was so big that they scarcely knew where to begin looking. Was there news of the Baudelaire parents hidden in the cupboard that stood near the entrance? Could there be information about the Snicket file stuffed into the large trunk that stood in one of the corners? And was it possible the children could find out the meaning of VFD by gazing into the crystal ball placed in the center of the table? Violet, Klaus, and Sunny looked around the tent and then at one another, and it seemed that the secrets concerning them could be hidden just about anywhere. "Where do you think we should look?" Violet asked. "I don't know," Klaus replied, squinting all around him. "I'm not even sure what to look for." "Well, maybe we should look for answers the way Count Olaf did," Violet said. "He told the whole story of his fortune-telling experience." "I remember," Klaus said. "First he entered Madame Lulu's tent. We've done that. Then he said they turned out all the lights." The Baudelaires looked up and noticed for the first time that the ceiling of the tent was decorated with small lights in the shape of stars, matching the stars on the tablecloth. "Switch," Sunny said, pointing to a pair of switches attached to one of the tent poles. "Good work, Sunny," Violet said. "Here, Klaus, walk with me so I can get a look at those switches." The two older Baudelaires watched freakishly over to the pole, but when they reached the switches, Violet frowned and shook her head. "What's wrong?" Klaus asked. "Oh, I wish I had a ribbon," Violet said, "to tie up my hair. It's hard to think seriously with my powdery hair getting in my eyes. But my hair ribbon is somewhere at Heimlich." Her voice trailed off, and Klaus saw that she had reached her hand into the pocket of Count Olaf's pants and was drawing out a ribbon that looked just like the one she usually wore. "Yours," Sunny said. "It is mine," Violet said, looking at it closely. "Count Olaf must have kept it when he was preparing me for surgery and left it in this pocket." "I'm glad you got it back," Klaus said with a slight shudder. "I don't like to think about Olaf getting his filthy hands on our possessions. Do you need some help tying your hair up? It might be difficult only using one hand, and I don't think you should take your other one out from under the shirt. We don't want to mess up our disguise." "I think I can manage it with one hand," Violet said. "Ah, there we go. I feel less like a freak and more like Violet Baudelaire with my hair up like this. Now let's see. Both of these switches are attached to wires that run up to the top of the tent. One of them obviously controls the lights, but what does the other one do?" The Baudelaires looked up again and saw something else attached to the ceiling of the tent. In between the stars was a small round mirror hanging from a piece of metal which held it at an odd angle. Attached to the metal was a long strip of rubber which led to a large knot of wires and gears, which in turn was attached to some more mirrors arranged in a sort of wheel. "What?" Sunny asked. "I don't know," Klaus said. "It sure doesn't look like anything I've read about." "It is an invention of some sort," Violet said, studying it carefully. She began to point to different parts of the strange device, but it was as if she was talking to herself instead of her siblings. That piece of rubber looks like a fan belt, which transmits torque from an automotive engine in order to help cool the radiator. But why would you want to... Oh, I see. It moves these other mirrors around, which... But how would... Wait a minute. Klaus, you see that small hole in the upper corner of the tent? Not without my glasses, Klaus admitted. Well, there's a small rip up there, Violet said. What direction are we facing if we face that small hole? Let me think, Klaus said. Last night the sun was setting as we got out of the car. You're right, Sunny said, which meant I remember the famous Hinterland sunset. And the car's over there, Klaus said, turning around and dragging his older sister with them. So that way is west, and the rip in the tent faces east. East, Violet said with a smile, the direction of the sunrise. That's right, Klaus said, but what does that have to do with anything? Violet said nothing, just stood and smiled at her siblings, and Klaus and Sunny smiled back. Even with the fake scars penciled on her face, Violet was smiling in a way the other Baudelaires recognized at once. It was the sort of smile that appeared when Violet had figured out a difficult problem, usually having to do with an invention of some sort. She had smiled this way when the siblings were in jail, and she figured out how a pitcher of water could help break them out. She had smiled this way when she looked over some evidence she had found in a suitcase which could convince Mr. Poe that their Uncle Monty had been murdered. And she was smiling this way now, as she looked up at the strange device on the ceiling, and then back down at the 2 switches on the wall. Watch this, she said, and flicked the first switch. Immediately the gears began to spin, and the long strip of rubber began to move, and the wheel of mirrors became a whirring circle. But what does it do? Klaus said. Listen, Violet said, and the children could hear a low buzzing hum coming from the machine. That's the hum Count Olaf was talking about. He thought it was coming from the crystal ball, but it was coming from this invention. I thought a magical hum sounded fishy, Klaus said. Leg roar, Sunny asked, which meant, but what about the lightning? You see how that larger mirror is angled? Violet said. It's pointed so that it reflects any light that comes out of the small hole in the tent. But there isn't any light coming from it, Klaus said. Not now, Violet said, because the hole is facing east and it's late in the afternoon. But in the morning, when Madame Lulu does her fortune-telling, the sun is rising, and the light of the sunrise would shine right on that mirror, and the mirror would reflect it into the other mirrors put into motion by the torquated belt. Wait, Klaus said, I don't understand. That's okay, Violet said. Count Olaf doesn't understand either. When he walks into the tent in the morning, Madame Lulu turns the invention on. The room is filled with flickering lights. Remember when I used the refraction of light to make a signaling device at Lake Lachrymose? It's the same thing, but Lulu tells him it's magical lightning. But wouldn't Olaf look up and see that it wasn't magical lightning? Not if the lights were off, Violet said, flicking the other switch, and above them the stars went out. The cloth of the tent was so thick that no light from outside shone in, and the Baudelaires found themselves in utter darkness. It reminded the children of when they were climbing down the elevator shaft of 667 Dark Avenue, except that had been silent, and here they were surrounded by the sound of the machine's hum. Eerie, Sunny said. It is spooky, Klaus agreed. No wonder Olaf thought it was a magical hum. Imagine how it would feel if the room were flickering with lightning, Violet said. That's the sort of trickery that makes people believe in fortune-telling. So Madame Lulu is a fake, Klaus said. Violet flicked both switches again, and the lights went on as the invention went off. She's a fake, all right, Violet said. I bet that crystal ball is just plain glass. She tricks Count Olaf into thinking she's a fortune-teller, so he'll buy her things like lions and new turbans. Chesro, Sunny asked, and looked up at her siblings. By Chesro, Sunny meant something along the lines of, but if she's a fake, how did she know that one of our parents was alive? But her siblings were almost afraid to answer her. She didn't, Sunny, Violet said quietly. Madame Lulu's information is as fake as her magic lightning. Sunny made a small, quiet sound that her siblings could barely hear behind her beard, and hugged Violet and Klaus's legs while her little body shivered with sadness. Suddenly it was Sunny's turn to bear the burden of Baudelaire grief, but she did not bear it for long, because Klaus thought of something that made the Baudelaires collect themselves. Wait a minute, Klaus said. Madame Lulu may be a fake, but her information might be real. After all, she always told Count Olaf where we were staying, and she was right about that. That's true, Violet said. I forgot about that. After all, Klaus said, reaching with difficulty into his pocket. We first thought that one of our parents might be alive after we read this. He unfolded a piece of paper that his sisters recognized as the 13th page of the Snicket file. There was a photograph stapled to the page, which showed the Baudelaire parents standing next to one man the Baudelaires had met briefly at the village of Foul Devotees, and one man the children did not recognize. And below the photograph was a sentence Klaus had read so many times that he did not need his glasses to read it again. Because of the evidence discussed on page 9, experts now suspect that there may in fact be one survivor of the fire, but the survivor's whereabouts are unknown. He recited, "Maybe Madame Lulu knows about this." "But how?" Violet asked. "Well, let's see," Klaus said. Count Olaf said that after the appearance of magical lightning, Madame Lulu told him to close his eyes so she could concentrate. "There," Sunny said, pointing to the table with the crystal ball. "No, Sunny," Violet said. "The crystal ball couldn't tell her. It's not magical, remember?" "There," Sunny insisted, and walked over to the table. Violet and Klaus followed her, walking awkwardly, and saw what she was pointing at. Sticking out from underneath the tablecloth was a tiny speck of white. Kneeling down in their shared pants, the older Baudelaires could see it was the very edge of a piece of paper. "Good thing you're closer to the ground than we are, Sunny," said Klaus. "We never would have noticed that." "But what is it?" Violet asked, sliding it out from under the tablecloth. Klaus reached into his pocket again, removed his glasses, and put them on. "Now I feel less like a freak and more like myself," he said with a smile, and began to read out loud. "My dear Duchess, your masked ball sounds like a fantastic evening, and I look forward to..." His voice trailed off, and he scanned the rest of the page. "It's just a note about a party," he said. "What's it doing underneath a tablecloth?" Violet asked. "It doesn't seem important to me," Klaus said, "but I guess it was important enough to Lulu that she hid it." "Let's see what else she's hiding," Violet said, and lifted the end of the tablecloth. All three Baudelaires gasped. It may seem strange to read that there was a library underneath Madame Lulu's table, but as the Baudelaire orphans knew, there are almost as many kinds of libraries as there are kinds of readers. The children had encountered a private library at the home of Justice Strauss, who they missed very much, and a scientific library at the home of Uncle Monty, who they would never see again. They had seen an academic library at Proof Rock Preparatory School, and a library at Lucky Smell's lumber mill that was understocked, a word which here means empty, except for 3 books. There are public libraries and medical libraries, secret libraries and forbidden libraries, libraries of records and libraries of auction catalogs, and there are archival libraries, which is a fancy term for a collection of files and documents rather than books. Excuse me. Archival libraries are usually found at universities, museums, or other quiet places, such as underneath a table, where people can go and examine whatever papers they like in order to find the information they need. The Baudelaire orphans gazed at the enormous piles of papers that were stuffed underneath the table, and realized that Madame Lulu had an archival library that just might contain the information they were looking for. "Look at all of this," Violet said. "There are newspaper articles, magazines, letters, files, photographs, all sorts of documents. Madame Lulu tells people to close their eyes and concentrate, and she looks through all this material and finds the answers. And they can't hear her shuffling paper," Klaus said over the hum of the lightning device. "It's like taking a test," Violet said, "with all the answers hidden in your school desk." "Cheat," Sunny said. "It is cheating," Klaus said, "but maybe her cheating can help us. Look, here's an article from the Daily Punctilio. Village of Foul Devotees to participate in new Guardian program," Violet said, peering over his shoulder at the headline. "The Council of Elders announced yesterday that they would care for the troublesome Baudelaire orphans," Klaus read, "as part of the city government's new program inspired by the aphorism, 'It takes a village to raise a child.'" "That's how Count Olaf found us," Violet said. "Madame Lulu pretended that the crystal ball told her where we were, but she just read it in the newspaper." Klaus flipped through a pile of paper until he saw his own name on a list. "Look," he said, "it's a list of new students at Proof Rock Preparatory School. Somehow Madame Lulu got a hold of it and passed the information to Olaf." "Us," Sunny said, showing a photograph to her siblings. Violet and Klaus looked at it and saw their sister was right. The youngest Baudelaire had found a small, blurry photograph of the 3 Baudelaires sitting on the edge of Damocles' dock, where they had arrived for their stay with Aunt Josephine. In the background, they could see Mr. Poe reaching his hand out to call for a taxi, while Violet stared glumly into a paper sack. "Those are the peppermints Mr. Poe gave us," Violet said quietly. "I'd almost forgotten about those." "But who took this?" Klaus asked. "Who was watching us that day?" "Back," Sunny said, and turned the photograph over. On the back, someone had written something in messy handwriting the children could scarcely read. I think it says, "This might be hopeful," Klaus said. Or helpful, Violet said. "This might be helpful," and it's signed with one initial. I think it's an R or maybe a K, but who would want a photograph of us? "It gives me the shivers to think someone took our picture when we didn't know it," Klaus said. "That means someone could be taking our photograph at any moment." The Baudelaires looked around hurriedly, but could see no photographer lurking in the tent. "Let's calm down," Violet said. "Remember the time we watched a scary movie when our parents were out for the evening and we were jumpy for the rest of the night? Every time we heard a noise, we thought vampires were breaking into the house to take us away." "Maybe someone was breaking into the house to take us away," Klaus said and pointed to the photograph. "Sometimes things can go on right in front of your nose, but you don't know about them." "Heebie-jeebies," Sunny said, which meant something like, "Let's get out of here, I'm really getting the creeps." "Me too," Violet said, "but let's take all these documents with us. Maybe we can find some place to look through them and find the information we want." "We can't take all these papers with us," Klaus said. "There's stacks and stacks. It'd be like checking out every single book in the library just to find the one you wanted to read." "We'll stuff our pockets," Violet said. "My pockets are already stuffed," Klaus said. "I have page 13 of the Snicket file and all those fragments from the Quagmire notebooks. I can't get rid of those, but I don't have room for anything else. It's as if all the world's secrets are here on paper, but which secrets do we take with us?" "Maybe we can look through it quickly right now," Violet said, "and take anything that has our names on it." "That's not the best method of research," Klaus said, "but I guess it'll have to do. Here, let me lift the tablecloth so we can see everything better." Violet and Klaus began to lift the tablecloth together, but it was very difficult to do that in their disguise. Like eating an ear of corn, lifting the tablecloth while sharing a shirt was trickier than it looked, and the tablecloth slid back and forth as the older Baudelaires struggled with it. As I'm sure you know, if you slide a tablecloth back and forth, the thing sitting on the tablecloth will slide too, and Madame Lulu's crystal ball began to slide closer and closer to the edge of the table. "Mishap," Sunny said. "Sunny's right," Violet said. "Let's be careful." "Right," Klaus said. "We don't want—" Klaus did not get to finish his sentence about what he and his sisters did not want, because with a dull thunk and a loud clattering crash, his sentence was finished for him. One of the most troublesome things in life is that what you do or do not want has very little to do with what does or does not happen. You might want to become the sort of author who works calmly at home, for example, but something could happen that would lead you to become the sort of author who works frantically in the homes of other people, often without their knowledge. You might want to marry someone you love very much, but something could happen that would prevent the two of you from ever seeing one another again. You might want to find out something important about your parents, but something could happen that would mean you wouldn't find out for quite some time. And you might want, at a particular moment, for a crystal ball not to fall off a table and shatter into 1,000 pieces, and even if it happened that the crystal ball did shatter, you might want the sound not to attract anyone's attention. But the sad truth is that the truth is sad, and what you want does not matter. A series of unfortunate events can happen to anyone, no matter what they want, and even though the three children did not want the flap of the fortune-telling tent to open, and they did not want Madame Lulu to step inside as the afternoon turned to evening at Caligari Carnival, everything happened to the Baudelaire orphans that they did not want at all. That's the end of chapter 6. Alright, let's catch up. I type all my secrets into books. It's a book and now a movie terror with zombies. Secret, I got a secret. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. Sounds really cool. Also smiles to fit in. Best reason to fake being magical so people give you lions. Undertable library. Lion lair libraries. HS libraries. Libraries. So any parents left alive, just don't read the paper. They found a picture showing the siblings all high-fiving in midair. It was a rad photo and the best summer ever. Mr. Egan? As long as you don't invite them in, you're fine. The mirror ball. Dancing. I always work frantically, but for no reason. I'm that kind of author, the one working in other people's homes without their knowledge. Oh. The sad truth is the truth is sad. Oh, hello, Skep Talk Live. How are you doing today? Great to have you. I hope you're having a great idea. This seems like a neat idea for a stream I've never been read to. Well, I'm glad to have you. I've been reading through the Series of Unfortunate Events books. As you can see, I'm on book 9. And I've also been, in between those, I read Nancy Drew mystery books, which is really fun. Your beverage can, oh, yeah. It, like, blends in because it's partly green. Yeah, I don't check the chat while I'm reading because I want it to be, like, you know, a cohesive chapter. And then I just catch up on the chat that happened while I was reading at the end of each chapter. So I have 2 more chapters to read today. I always try to break my books into 3 parts, like as equal of parts as I can make them. So I did 4 chapters the first session of this book. I'll do 4 chapters today. I have 2 left, and then the remaining 5 chapters when I come back to this, which may be tomorrow morning. I kind of have some extra time that I didn't know I was going to have, so that would be, I might fill it with that. Doing really well, looking for something to listen to while I work. Well, absolutely, it's a pleasure to have you. Basically like live audiobook, I guess is the best way I can describe it. All right, well, I started getting like dry throat, like scratchy. So let me drink a few more sips and then I'll jump into chapter 7. Also, I hope you enjoyed TwitchCon 2018. Because I did. You can't see the yellow because it blends in with my green screen, but yeah, TwitchCon 2018 was great. I hope you had a great time. I did. Okay. Oh, and thank you for the follow, officially. I don't do only book streams. I also do gaming streams as well. But I do try to do at least 1 book stream a week. Sometimes 2. If that doesn't work, just get a new throat. Oh, okay. I'll just go run down to the urgent care and be like, I need a throat transplant stat. It was very fun. Made a lot of cool friends. That's awesome. It was really great. I had a good time. Okay. Moving on. Throat clear. Okay. Whoops. I dropped my bookmark. Have I shown you guys my bookmark before? It's a NES controller. Okay. Special price just for me. Woo! Okay. Chapter 7. What are you doing here, please? Madame Lulu snarled. She strode quickly toward them, her own eyes glaring as angrily as the eye she was wearing around her neck. What are the freaks doing in the tent, please? And what are the freaks doing under the table, please? And please answer me this instant, please, or you will be very, very sorry, please, and thank you. The Baudelaire orphans looked up at the fake fortune teller, and a strange thing happened. Rather than quaking with fear or crying out in horror or huddling together as Lulu shrieked at them, the 3 children stood resolute, a phrase which here means did not become frightened at all. Now that they knew that Madame Lulu used a machine on her ceiling and an archival library under her table to disguise herself as a magical and mysterious person, it was as if every frightening thing about her had melted away, and she was just a woman with an odd accent and a bad temper who had crucial information the Baudelaires needed. As Madame Lulu carried on, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny watched her without a terrified thought in their heads. Madame Lulu yelled and yelled, but the children felt just as angry at Lulu as Lulu was at them. How dare you please enter the tent without permission of Madame Lulu? Madame Lulu cried. I am the boss of Caligari Carnival, please, and you must obey me every single moment of your freakish lives. Please, I have never seen, please, the freaks who are so ungrateful to Madame Lulu. You are in the worst of the trouble, please. By now, Lulu had reached the table and saw the pile of broken glass which sparkled all over the floor. You are the breakers of the crystal ball? She bellowed, pointing a dirty fingernail at the Baudelaires. You should be ashamed of your freaky selves. The crystal ball is the very valuable thing, please, and is having of the magical powers. Fraud, Sunny cried. That crystal ball wasn't magical, Violet translated angrily. It was plain glass, and you're not a real fortune teller either. We analyzed your lightning device, and we found your archival library. This is all just one big disguise, Klaus said, gesturing around the tent. You're the one who should be ashamed of yourself. Madame Lulu said, but she shut her mouth before she could finish the word. She looked down at the Baudelaires, and her eyes grew very wide. Then she sat down in a chair, lay her head down next to the crystal ball, and began to cry. I am ashamed of myself, she said in an unaccented voice, and reached up to her turban. With a flick of her wrist, she unraveled the turban, and her long blonde hair fell down around her tear-stained face. I am utterly ashamed of myself, she said through her tears, and her shoulders shook with sobs. The Baudelaires looked at one another, and then at the quaking woman sitting near them. It is hard for decent people to stay angry at someone who has just burst into tears, which is why it is often a good idea to burst into tears if a decent person is yelling at you. The three children watched as Madame Lulu cried and cried, pausing only to wipe her eyes with her sleeves, but they could not help but feel a little bit sad too, even as their anger continued. Madame Lulu, Violet said firmly, although not as firmly as she would have liked. Why did you... Oh, Madame Lulu cried at the sound of her name. Don't call me that. She reached up to her neck and yanked on the cord that held the eye around her neck. It broke with a snap, and she dropped it to the ground where it lay amid the pieces of shattered glass while she went on sobbing. My name is Olivia, she said finally with a shuddering sigh. I'm not Madame Lulu, and I'm not a fortune teller. But why are you pretending to be these things? Klaus asked. Why are you wearing a disguise? Why are you helping Count Olaf? I try to help everyone, Olivia said sadly. My motto is give people what they want. That's why I'm here at the carnival. I pretend to be a fortune teller, and I tell people whatever they want to hear. If Count Olaf or one of his henchmen steps inside and asks me where the Baudelaires are, I tell them. If Jacques Snicket or another volunteer steps inside and asks me if his brother is alive, I tell them. The Baudelaires felt so many questions tripping up inside them that they could scarcely decide which one to ask. But where do you learn the answers? Violet asked, pointing to the piles of paper underneath the table. Where does all this information come from? Libraries, mostly, Olivia said, wiping her eyes. If you want people to think you're a fortune teller, you have to answer their questions, and the answer to nearly every question is written down someplace. It just might take a while to find. It's taken me a long time to gather my archival library, and I still don't have all of the answers I've been looking for. So sometimes when someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer, I just make something up. When you told Count Olaf that one of our parents was alive, Klaus asked, were you making it up, or did you know the answer? Olivia frowned. Count Olaf didn't ask anything about the parents of any carnival free... Wait a minute. Your voices sound different. Beverly, you have a ribbon in your hair, and your other head is wearing glasses. What's going on? The three children looked at one another in surprise. They'd been so interested in what Olivia was saying that they had completely forgotten about their disguises, but now it appeared that disguises might not be necessary. The siblings needed to have their questions answered honestly, and it seemed more likely that Olivia would give them honest answers if the children were honest themselves. Without speaking, the Baudelaires stood up and removed their disguises. Violet and Klaus unbuttoned the shirt they were sharing, stretching the arms they'd been keeping cooped up, and then stepped out of the fur-cuffed pants while Sunny unwrapped the beard from around her. In no time at all, the Baudelaires were standing in the tent in their regular clothing, except for Violet, who was still wearing a hospital gown from her stay in the surgical ward, with their disguises on the floor in a heap. The older Baudelaires even shook their heads vigorously, a word which here means in order to shake the talcum powder out of their hair, and rubbed at their faces so their disguised scars would disappear. I'm not really Beverly, Violet said, and this is my brother, not my other head. And that's not Chabo the wolf baby. I know who she is, Violet said, looking at them all amazedly. I know who all of you are. You're the Baudelaires. Yes, Klaus said, and he and his sisters smiled. It felt as if it had been 100 years since someone had called the Baudelaires by their proper names, and when Olivia recognized them, it was as if they were finally themselves again, instead of carnival freaks or any other fake identity. Yes, Klaus said again. We're the Baudelaires. 3 of them anyway. We're not sure, but we think there might be a 4th. We think one of our parents could be alive. Not sure, Violet asked, but isn't the answer in the Snicket file? We just have the last page of the Snicket file, Klaus said, and pulled page 13 out of his pocket again. We're trying to find the rest of it before Olaf does, but the last page says there may be a survivor of the fire. Do you know if that's true? I have no idea, Olivia admitted. I've been looking for the Snicket file myself. Every time I see a piece of paper blow by, I chase after it to see if it's one of the pages. But you told Count Olaf that one of our parents is alive, Violet said, and that they're hiding in the Mortmain Mountains. I was just guessing, Violet said. If one of your parents had survived, though, that's probably where they'd be. Somewhere in the Mortmain Mountains is one of the last surviving headquarters of VFD. But you know that, of course. We don't know that, Klaus said. We don't even know what VFD stands for. Then how did you learn to disguise yourselves? Olivia asked in astonishment. You used all 3 phases of VFD disguise training. Veiled facial disguises with your fake scars, various finery disguises with the clothing you wore, and voice fakery disguises with the different voices you used. Well, now that I think of it, you're even using disguises that look like things in my disguise kit. Olivia stood up and walked over to the trunk that sat in the corner. Taking a key out of her pocket, she unlocked it and began to go through its contents. The siblings watched as she lifted an assortment of things out of the trunk, all of which the children recognized. First, she removed a wig that looked like the one Count Olaf had used when he was pretending to be a woman named Shirley, and then a fake wooden leg he had used as part of his ship captain disguise. She removed a pair of pots that Olaf's bald associate had used when the children were living in Paltryville, and a motorcycle helmet that looked identical to the one Esme Squalor had used to disguise herself as a police officer. Finally, Olivia held up a shirt with fancy ruffles all over it, exactly like the one that lay at the Baudelaire's feet. You see, she said, this is the same shirt as the one you 2 were wearing. But we got ours from Count Olaf's trunk, Violet said. Well, that makes sense, Olivia replied. All volunteers have the same disguise kit. There are people trying to use these disguises all over the world trying to bring Count Olaf to justice. What? Sunny asked. I'm confused too, Klaus said. We're all confused, Olivia. What is VFD? Sometimes it seems like they're good people, and sometimes it seems like they're bad people. It's not as simple as all that, Olivia said sadly. She took a surgical mask out of the trunk and held it in her hand. The items in the disguise kit are just things, Baudelaires. You can use these things to help people or to harm them, and many people use them to do both. Sometimes it's hard to know which disguise to use or what to do once you've put one on. I don't understand, Violet said. Some people are like those lions Olaf brought here, Olivia said. They start out being good people, but before they know it, they've become something else. Those lions used to be noble creatures. A friend of mine trained them to smell smoke, which was very helpful in our work. But now Count Olaf is denying them food and hitting them with his whip, and tomorrow afternoon they'll probably devour one of the freaks. The world is a harum-scarum place. Harem? Sunny asked. It's complicated and confusing, Olivia explained. They say that long ago it was simple and quiet, but that might just be a legend. There was a schism in VFD, a great big fight between many of the members, and since then it's been hard for me to know what to do. I never thought I'd be the sort of person who helps villains, but now I do. Haven't you ever found yourself doing something you never thought you'd do? I guess so, Klaus said and turned to his sisters. Remember when we stole those keys from Hal at the Library of Records? I never thought I'd be a thief. Flynn, Sunny said, which meant something like, and I never thought I'd become a violent person, but I engaged in a sword fight with Dr. Orwell. We've all done things we never thought we'd do, Violet said, but we always had a good reason. Everybody thinks they have a good reason, Olivia said. Count Olaf thinks getting a fortune is a good reason to slaughter you. Esme Squalor thinks being Olaf's girlfriend is a good reason to join his troop. And when I told Count Olaf where to find you, I had a good reason. Because my motto is give people what they want. Dubious, Sunny said. Sunny's not sure that's a very good reason, Violet translated, and I must say I agree with her. You've caused a lot of grief, Olivia, to a lot of people, just so you could give Count Olaf what he wanted. Olivia nodded and tears appeared in her eyes once more. I know it, she said miserably. I'm ashamed of myself, but I don't know what else to do. You could stop helping Olaf, Klaus said, and help us instead. You could tell us everything you know about VFD, and you could take us to the Mortmain Mountains to see if one of our parents is really alive. I don't know, Olivia said. I've behaved so badly for so long, but maybe I could change. She stood up straight and looked sadly around the darkening tent. I used to be a noble person, she said. Do you think I could be noble again? I don't know, Klaus said, but let's find out. We could leave together right now and head north. But how? Olivia said. We don't have a car or a minivan or 4 horses or a large slingshot or any other way to get out of the hinterlands. Violet retied the ribbon in her hair and looked up at the ceiling in thought. Olivia, she said finally, do the carts on that roller coaster still work? The carts? Olivia repeated. Sort of. The wheels move, but there's a small engine in each cart, and I think the engines have rusted away. I think I could rebuild an engine using your lightning device, Violet said. After all, that piece of rubber is a bit like a fan belt, Olivia finished. That's a good idea, Violet. I'll sneak out to the roller coaster tonight, Violet said, and get to work. We'll leave in the morning before anyone gets up. Better not do it tonight, Olivia said. Count Olaf or his henchmen are always lurking around at night. It'd be better to leave in the afternoon when everyone's at the House of Freaks. You can put the invention together first thing in the morning when Olaf will be in here asking the crystal ball about you. What will you do then? Klaus asked. I have a spare crystal ball, Olivia answered. This isn't the first one that's broken. That's not what I mean, Klaus said. I mean, you won't tell Count Olaf that we're here at the carnival, will you? Olivia paused for a moment and shook her head. No, she said, but she did not sound very sure. Promise? Sunny asked. Olivia looked down at the youngest Baudelaire for a long time without answering. Yes, she finally said in a very quiet voice. I promise. If you promise to take me with you to find VFD. We promise, Violet said, and her siblings nodded in agreement. Now let's start at the beginning. What does VFD stand for? Madame Lulu, called a scratchy voice from outside the tent. The Baudelaires looked at one another in dismay as Count Olaf called the fake name of the woman beside them. Madame Lulu, where are you? I am in fortune-telling tent, my Olaf, Olivia replied, slipping into her accent as easily as the Baudelaires could slip into the ruffled shirt. But do not come in, please. I am doing secret ritual with crystal ball of mine. Well, hurry up, Olaf said grumpily. The pit is done, and I'm very thirsty. Come pour us all some wine. Just 1 minute, my Olaf, Olivia said, reaching down to grab the material for her turban. Why don't you be taking of a shower, please? You must be sweaty from all the pit digging, and when you are done, we will all be having of the wine together. Don't be ridiculous, Count Olaf replied. I took a shower 10 days ago. I'll go put on some extra cologne and meet you in your caravan. Yes, my Olaf, Olivia called, and then turned to whisper to the children as she wound the turban around her hair. We'd better cut short our conversation, she said. The others will be looking for you. When we leave here tomorrow, I'll tell you everything you want to know. Couldn't you just tell us a few things now? Klaus asked. The Baudelaires had never been closer to the answers they were seeking, and delaying things any further was almost more than they could stand. No, Olivia decided. Here, I'd better get you back into your disguises or you'll get caught. The 3 children looked at one another reluctantly. I guess you're right, Violet said firmly. The others will be looking for us. Profco, Sunny said, which meant I guess so, and began to wind the beard around her. Violet and Klaus stepped into the fur-cuffed pants and buttoned the shirt around them, while Olivia tied her necklace back together so she could become Madame Lulu once more. Our scars, Klaus remembered, looking at his sister's face. We rubbed them off. And our hair needs repowdering, Violet said. I have a makeup pencil, please, Olivia said, reaching into the trunk, and also the powder of talcum. You don't have to use your accent right now, Violet said, taking the ribbon out of her hair. It's good to practice, please, Olivia replied. I must be thinking of myself as Madame Lulu, otherwise I will please be forgetting of the disguise. But you'll remember our promises, won't you? Klaus asked. Promises? Madame Lulu repeated. You promised you wouldn't tell Count Olaf that we're here, Violet said, and we promised to take you with us to the Mortmain Mountains. Of course, Beverly, Madame Lulu replied. I will be keeping of the promise to freaks. I'm not Beverly, Violet said, and I'm not a freak. Madame Lulu smiled and leaned in to pencil a scar on the eldest Baudelaire's face. But it is time for disguises, please, she said. Don't be forgetting of your disguised voices, or you will be recognized. We won't forget our disguises, Klaus said, putting his glasses back in his pocket. And you won't forget your promise, right? Of course, please, Madame Lulu said, leading the children out of the fortune-telling tent. Do not be of the worrying, please. The siblings stepped out of the tent with Madame Lulu and found themselves bathed in the blue light of the famous hinterland sunset. The light made each of them look a bit different, as if they were wearing another blue disguise on top of their carnival disguises. The powder in Violet's hair made her head look a pale, strange color. Klaus's fake scars looked darker and more sinister in the shadows, and Sunny looked like a small blue cloud with small sparks of white, where her teeth reflected the last of the sun. And Madame Lulu looked more like a fortune-teller as the sunset glistened on the jewel in her turban and shone on her long robe in an eerie light that looked almost magical. Good night, my freaky ones, she said, and the Baudelaires looked at this mysterious woman and wondered if she had really changed her motto and would become a noble person once more. I will be keeping of the promise, Madame Lulu said, but the Baudelaire orphans did not know if she was speaking the truth or just telling them what they wanted to hear. End of chapter 7. Grabs his coffee and gets ready. I hope it is fantastic. Yep, TwitchCon was fun. Hopefully next time you can go. Thank you for the bookmark compliments. I hope that you are settling in and listening well. Ready? I'm adding you to my auto-host list right now. This is awesome. Aw. I didn't mean to skip everything. My bot just went blink and like down to the end. And I saw that. Okay. You should be ashamed of your freaky self. I assumed it was because I was listening to Super Freak by Rick James. That's why, obviously. Madame Lulu became Madame Boo-hoo. Everything we said was a lie except our sloppy corn eating. We're just awful at corny. Oh, thank you for that host, Skep. These lions used to be people? Is that what Olivia was saying? Pretty sure. Count Olaf was Shirley? It's true. 10 days ago. Gosh, he showers too often. More than me. I joke. I'm glad you're enjoying this, Skep. That's awesome. Is that what I should call you? Should I just call you Skep? I have hair in my mouth. That was gross. Okay. Like gasp. Thank you for the claps. We have one more chapter to get through tonight. I joke. I never shower. One more chapter for today, and then I might finish the book in the morning. Just don't count on that, because I may decide to lay around in my bed like a lazy bum, because I have tomorrow off. And I also have to get one more Pokemon up to levels. The laugh! The creepy laugh. There's the creepy laugh. I should stop. I should not claim it. I heartily recommend the lazy bum life, but that's up to you. I'll see what happens. I may wake up earlier than I want to and just be like, okay. Oh, I'm glad you're still here, Timo. Good, good. Hope you're enjoying. Okay. In case you guys... Chapter 8 is where the I Heart Freaks dress is featured, obviously. The one that I use for the opening screen. Okay. Chapter 8. By the time the Baudelaire orphans found their way back to the Freaks' caravan, Hugo, Colette, and Kevin were waiting for them. Colette and Kevin were just finishing a game of dominoes, and Hugo had cooked up a pot of tom kha gai, which is a delicious soup commonly eaten in Thailand. But as the Baudelaires sat at the table and ate their supper, they were not in the mood to digest the mixture of chicken, vegetables, fancy mushrooms, fresh ginger, coconut milk, and water chestnuts that the hunchback had prepared. They were more concerned with digesting information. a phrase which here means thinking about everything that Madame Lulu had told them. Violet took a spoonful of hot broth, but she was thinking so hard about Lulu's archival library that she scarcely noticed the unusual sweet taste. Klaus chewed on a water chestnut, but he was wondering so much about the headquarters in the Mortmain Mountains that he didn't appreciate its appealing crunchy texture. And Sunny tipped the bowl forward to take a large sip, but she was so curious about the disguise kit that she wasn't aware that her beard was getting soaked. Each of the 3 children finished their soup to the last drop, but they were so eager to hear more from Lulu about the mystery of VFD that they felt hungrier than when they sat down. "Everyone sure is quiet tonight," Colette said, contorting her head underneath her armpit to look around the table. "Hugo and Kevin, you haven't talked much, and I don't think I've heard a single growl from Chabo or heard a word out of either of your heads."
"I guess we're not feeling much like making conversation," Violet said, remembering to speak as low as she could. "We have a lot to think about."
"We sure do," Hugo said. "I'm still not wild about the idea of getting eaten by a lion." "Me neither," Colette said, "but today's visitors were certainly excited about the carnival's new attraction. Everyone does seem to love violence." "And sloppy eating," Hugo said, dabbing at his mouth with a napkin. "It's certainly an interesting dilemma." "I don't think it's an interesting dilemma," Klaus said, squinting at his co-workers. "I think it's a terrible one. Tomorrow afternoon, someone will jump to their deaths." He did not add that the Baudelaires planned to be far away from Caligari Carnival by then, heading out to the Mortmain Mountains in the invention Violet planned to construct early tomorrow morning. "I don't know what we can do about it," Kevin said. "On one hand, I'd rather keep on performing at the House of Freaks instead of being fed to the lions. But on the other hand, and in my case, both my hands are equally strong, Madame Lulu's motto is give people what they want, and apparently what they want is this carnival to be carnivorous."
I think it's a terrible motto," Violet said, and Sunny growled in agreement. "There are better things to do with your life than just doing something humiliating and dangerous just to make total strangers happy."
"Like what?" Colette asked. The Baudelaires looked at one another. They were afraid to reveal their plan to their co-workers in case one of them would tell Count Olaf and ruin their escape, but they also couldn't stand resolute knowing that something terrible would happen just because Hugo, Colette, and Kevin felt obligated to be freaks and live up to Madame Lulu's motto.
"You never know when you'll find something else to do," Violet said finally. "It could happen at any moment."
"Do you really think so?" Hugo asked hopefully. "Yes," Klaus said. "You never know when opportunity will knock." Kevin looked up from his soup and gazed at the Baudelaires with a look of hope in his eye. "Which hand will it knock with?" "Opportunity can knock with any hand, Kevin," Klaus said, and at that moment there was a knock at the door. "Open up, freaks!" The impatient voice coming from outside the caravan made the children jump. As I'm sure you know, when Klaus used the expression opportunity will knock, he meant that his co-workers might find something better to do with their time instead of leaping into a pit of hungry lions just to give some people what they wanted. He did not mean that the girlfriend of a notorious villain would actually knock on the door and give them an idea that was possibly even worse, but I am sorry to say that it was Esme Squalor who was knocking, her long fingernails clattering against the door. "Open up, I just want to talk to you." "Just one moment, Miss Squalor," Hugo called and walked over to the door. "Let's all be on our best behavior," he said to his co-workers. "It's not often that a normal person wants to talk to us, and I think we should make the most of this opportunity." "We'll be good," Colette promised. "I won't bend into a single strange position." "And I'll only use my my right hand," Kevin said. Or maybe only my left." "Good idea," Hugo said, and opened the door. Esme Squalor was leaning in the doorway with a wicked smile on her face. "I am Esme Gigi Genevieve Squalor," she said, which was often how she announced herself, even when everyone nearby knew who she was. She stepped inside the Freaks caravan, and the Baudelaires could see that she had dressed for the occasion, a phrase which here means put on a specific outfit in an attempt to impress them. She was dressed in a long white gown, so long that it passed her feet and lay around her as if she were standing in a large puddle of milk. Embroidered on the front of the gown in glittery thread were the words, "I love freaks," except instead of the word love, there was an enormous heart, a symbol sometimes used by people who have trouble figuring out the difference between words and shapes. On one of the shoulders of the gown, Esme had tied a large brown sack, and on her head she had an odd round hat with black thread poking out of the top, and it had a large angry face drawn on the front of it. The children knew that such an outfit must be very in, otherwise Esme would not be wearing it, but they could not imagine who in the world would admire such strange clothing. "What a lovely outfit," Hugo said. "Thank you," Esme said. She poked Colette with one of her long fingernails, and the contortionist stood up so Esme could sit down in her chair. "As you can see from the front of my gown, I love freaks." "You do?" Kevin said. "That's very nice of you." "Yes, it is," Esme agreed. "I had this dress made especially to show how much I love them. Look, there's a cushion on the shoulder to resemble a hunchback, and my hat makes me look as if I have two heads like Beverly and Elliot." "You certainly look very freakish," Colette said. Esme frowned as if this wasn't quite what she wanted to hear. "Of course, I'm not really a freak," she said. "I'm a normal person, but I wanted to show you how much I admire you all. Now, please bring me a carton of buttermilk. It's very in." "We don't have any," Hugo said, "but I think we might have some cranberry juice, or I could make you some hot chocolate. Chabo here taught me to add cinnamon to the hot chocolate, and it tastes quite delicious." "Tom Kagai," Sunny said. "Oh, we also have soup," Hugo added. Esme looked down at Sunny and frowned. "No, thank you," she said, "although it's very kind of you to offer. In fact, you freaks are so kind that I consider you to be more than employees at a carnival that I happen to be visiting. I consider you to be some of my closest friends." The children knew, of course, that this ridiculous statement was as fake as Esme's second head, but their co-workers were thrilled. Hugo gave Esme a big smile and stood up straight so you could barely see his hunchback. Kevin blushed and looked down at his hands, and Colette was so excited that before she could stop herself, she twisted her body until it resembled the letter K and the letter S at the same time. "Oh, Esme," Colette said, "do you really mean that?" "Of course I mean it," Esme said, pointing to the front of her gown. "I would rather be here with you than with the finest people in the world." "Gosh," Kevin said, "no normal person has ever called me a friend." "Well, that's what you are," Esme said, and leaned toward Kevin to kiss him on the nose. "You're all my freaky friends, and it makes me so sad to think that one of you will be eaten by lions tomorrow." The Baudelaires watched as she reached into a pocket in her gown and drew out a white handkerchief embroidered with the same slogan as her gown, and held up the word freaks to dab at her eyes. "I have real tears in my eyes just thinking about it," she explained. There, close friend," Kevin said and patted one of her hands. "Don't be sad." "I can't help it," Esme said, yanking back her own hand as if she were afraid that being ambidextrous was contagious. "But I have an opportunity for you that might make all of us very, very happy." "An opportunity?" Hugo said. "Why, Beverly and Elliot were just telling us that an opportunity could come along at any minute." "And they were right," Esme said. "Tonight I am offering you the opportunity to quit your jobs at the House of Freaks and join Count Olaf and myself in his troupe." "What would we do exactly?" Hugo asked. Esme smiled and began to accentuate the positive aspects of working with Count Olaf, a phrase which here means make the opportunity sound better than it really was by emphasizing the good parts and scarcely mentioning the bad. "It's a theatrical troupe," she said, "so you'd be wearing costumes and doing dramatic exercises and occasionally committing crimes." "Dramatic exercises," Kevin exclaimed, clasping both hands to his heart. "It's always been my heart's desire to perform on a stage. And I've always wanted to wear a costume," Hugo said. "But you do perform on a stage," Violet said, "and you wear an ill-fitting costume every day at the House of Freaks." "If you joined, you'd get to travel with us to exciting places," Esme continued, glaring at Violet. "Members of Count Olaf's troupe have seen the trees of Finite Forest, and the shores of Lake Lachrymose, and the crows of the village of Foul Devotees, although they always have to sit in the back seat. And best of all, you'd get to work for Count Olaf, one of the most brilliant and handsome men who ever walked the face of the earth." "Do you really think that a normal man like him would want to work with freaks like us?" Colette asked. Of course he would, Esme said. Count Olaf doesn't care whether you have something wrong with you or if you're normal, as long as you're willing to carry out his orders. I think you'll find that working in Olaf's troupe is a job where people won't think you're freakish at all, and you'll be paid a fortune. At least, Count Olaf will be. Wow, Hugo said. What an opportunity. I had a hunch you'd be excited about it, Esme said. No offense, Hugo. Now, if you're interested in joining, there's just one thing you need to do. A job interview? Colette asked nervously. There's no need for close friends of mine to do anything as unpleasant as a job interview, Esme said. You just have to do one simple task. Tomorrow afternoon, during the show with the lions, Count Olaf will announce which freak will jump into the pit of lions. But I want whoever is chosen to throw Madame Lulu in instead. The freaks' caravan was silent for a moment as everyone digested this information. You mean, Hugo said finally, you want us to murder Madame Lulu? Don't think of it as a murder, Esme said. Think of it as a dramatic exercise. It's a special surprise for Count Olaf that will prove to him that you're brave enough to join his troupe. Throwing Lulu into a pit of lions doesn't strike me as particularly brave, Colette said. Just cruel and vicious. How can it be cruel and vicious to give people what they want? Esme asked. You want to join Count Olaf's troupe, the crowd wants to see someone eaten by lions, and I want Madame Lulu thrown into the pit. Tomorrow, one of you will have that exciting opportunity to give everybody exactly what they want. Grrr, Sunny growled, but only her siblings understood that she really meant everybody except Lulu. When you put it like that, Hugo said, it doesn't sound so bad. Of course it doesn't, Esme said, adjusting her false head. Besides, Madame Lulu was eager to see all of you eaten by lions, so you should be happy to throw her into the pit. But why do you want Madame Lulu thrown in? Colette asked. Esme scowled. Count Olaf thinks we have to make this carnival popular, so that Madame Lulu will help us with her crystal ball, she said. But I don't think we need her help. Besides, I'm tired of my boyfriend buying her presents. That doesn't seem like such a good reason for someone to be eaten by lions, Violet said carefully in her disguised voice. I'm not surprised that a two-headed person like yourself is a little confused, Esme said, and reached out her long-nailed hands to pat both Violet and Klaus on their scarred faces. Once you join Olaf's troupe, you won't be troubled by that kind of freakish thinking any longer. Just think, Hugo said. Tomorrow we'll stop being freaks and we'll be henchmen of Count Olaf. I prefer the term hench people, Colette said. Esme gave everyone in the room a big smile and then reached up to her shoulder and opened the brown sack. To celebrate your new jobs, she said, I brought each of you a present. A present? Kevin said. Madame Lulu never gave us presents. This is for you, Hugo, Esme said, and took out an oversized coat the Baudelaires recognized from a time when the hook-handed man had disguised himself as a doorman. The coat was so big that it had covered his hooks, and as Hugo tried it on, they saw it was also big enough to fit Hugo, even with his irregular shape. Hugo looked at himself in the mirror and then at his co-workers in joy. It covers my hunchback, he said happily. I look normal, instead of freakish. You see, Esme said, Count Olaf is already making your life so much better. And look what I have for you, Colette. The Baudelaires watched as Olaf's girlfriend reached into the sack and pulled out the long black robe that they had seen in the trunk of the automobile. It's so baggy, Esme explained, that you can twist your body any which way and no one will notice that you're a contortionist. It's like a dream come true, Colette said, grabbing it out of Esme's hand. I'd throw 100 people into the lion pit to wear something like this. And Kevin, Esme said, look at this small piece of rope. Turn around, I'll tie your right hand behind your back so you can't possibly use it. And then I'll be left-handed, like normal people, Kevin said, jumping out of his chair and standing on his two equally strong feet. Hooray! The ambidextrous person turned around so happily, so Esme could tie his right hand behind his back, and in a moment he became someone with only one useful arm instead of two. I haven't forgotten you two, Esme continued, smiling at the three of them. Chabo, Here's a long razor that Count Olaf uses when he needs to disguise himself with a good shave. I thought you could use that to trim some of your ugly wolf hair. And for you, Beverly and Elliot, I have this. Esme removed the sack from her gown and held it out to the older Baudelaires triumphantly. Violet and Klaus peeked inside and saw that it was empty. This sack is perfect to cover up one of your heads, she explained. You'll look like a normal one-headed person who just happens to have a sack balanced on their shoulder. Isn't that smashing? I guess so, Klaus said in his fake high voice. What's the matter with you? Hugo demanded. You've been offered an exciting job and given a generous present, and yet both of your heads are moping around. You too, Chabo, Colette said. I can see through your fur you don't look very enthusiastic.
We think this might be an opportunity that we should refuse, Violet said, and her siblings nodded in agreement. What? Esme said sharply. It's nothing personal, Klaus added quickly, although not wanting to work for Count Olaf was about as personal as things could get. It does seem very exciting to work in a theatrical troupe, and Count Olaf does seem like a terrific person. Then what's the problem? Kevin asked. Well, Violet said, I don't think I'm comfortable throwing Madame Lulu to the lions. As her other head, I agree, Klaus said, and Chabo agrees too. I bet she only half agrees, Hugo said. I bet her wolf half can't wait to watch her get eaten. Sunny shook her head and growled as gently as she could, and Violet lifted her up and placed her on the table. It just doesn't seem right, Violet said. Madame Lulu isn't the nicest person I know, but I'm not sure she deserves to be devoured. Esme gave the older Baudelaires a large false smile and leaned forward to pat them each on the head again. Don't worry your heads over whether or not she deserves to be devoured, she said, and then she smiled down at Chabo. You don't deserve to be half wolf, do you? She asked. People don't always get what they deserve in this world. It still seems like a wicked thing to do, Klaus said. I don't think so, Hugo said. It's just giving people what they want, like Lulu says. Why don't you sleep on it? Esme suggested and stood up from the table. Right after tomorrow's show, Count Olaf is heading north to the Mortmain Mountains to take care of something important, and Madame Lulu is eaten by then. If Madame Lulu is eaten by then, you'll be allowed to join him. You can decide in the morning whether you want to be brave members of a theater troupe or cowardly freaks in a rundown carnival. I don't need to sleep on it, Kevin said. Me neither, Colette said. I can decide right now. Yes, Hugo agreed. I want to join Count Olaf. I'm glad to hear that, Esme said. Maybe you can convince your co-workers to join you in joining me joining him. She looked scornfully at the three children as she opened the door to the caravan. The hinterland sunset was long over, and there was not a trace of blue light falling on the carnival. Think about this, Beverly and Elliot, and Chabo, too, she said. It just might be a wicked thing, throwing Madame Lulu into a pit full of carnivorous lions. Esme took a step outside, and it was so dark that Olaf's girlfriend looked like a ghost in a long white gown and a fake extra head. But if you don't join us, where could you possibly go? She asked. The Baudelaire orphans had no answer for Esme Squaller's terrible question, but Esme answered it herself with a long, wicked laugh. If you don't choose the wicked thing, what in the world will you do? She asked, and disappeared into the night. That's the end of chapter 8, and the last chapter I'm going to read for this stream. Just stay up late tonight so you don't wake up early. Fancy shrooms. A bit tired today still. Aw. Opportunity is ambidextrous. Opportunity is a freak. Kevin is super freaky. Yeah, dies. Alright. I don't know the difference between words and shapes. Whoa, Esme. This music is kind of amusingly appropriate. I don't remember what it was. I've never had someone call me friend. Happy music plays. Back off, Kevin. Don't give me ambivalence, Kevin. That's the contagious disease where one becomes ambidextrous, right? Don't think of it as murder, rather as feeding of the lions. They're ever so hungry. Hooray, 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 hooray. He's still Kevin, smashing. Nigel Thornberry, where'd you come from? And who can go against the people who want violence? How can you fight that?
Standing ovation and claps. Comfy chair ovation. That is fine with me. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me while I knocked out the second chunk of this book. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the night and enjoyed the story. I'm gonna just go chill for my night, I think, now. So I don't know if anybody plans to stream or anything, but let me see if anybody's live that I want to raid. I'm looking. Oh, you're welcome, of course. You're welcome. Oh, my friend Mecha is streaming. Let me get a raid going. Raid. American Mecha. Great. Okay, great. So. Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even see in. Sorry. Mecha was just on the top. Yeah, anyway. I'm gonna raid Mecha, but you guys have a great rest of the day. I'll probably pop into in-stream later. There's so many strums, I know. Hi Moocher, didn't know you were here. Hope you have a great day. Was here all the time, forgot to log in. Oh, okay. Yeah, brilliant sunshine strats. It's gonna be great. Alright, you guys, take care. I'll talk to you all soon. You'll definitely see me tomorrow at some point, because Best Wednesday is tomorrow, but maybe I'll stream a second early stream. Just, maybe. Have a great rest of the night, guys. I'll take care of yourselves, and as always, until I see you again, much love from me to you. Bye.